Hey Clashes, the update is here, and this leaves two big questions. The first one, what is the best seasonal defense to upgrade? And the second one, what is the best upgrade order depending on the different modules? Because we have one, giving more hit points, and two, increasing the power of that seasonal defense. You can see an entire overview right here from Clash Ninja, where you can see the costs, but as well the time overall. I have to say, I think for the duration of a season of 3 months, the upgrade time is just way too high. But I will share a little bit more of insight on how I feel about the current temporary upgrades in general in Clash of Clans at the end of the video. I think we're just going to go through every single seasonal defense, and I will share with you the order, and then we're going to take a look at what is actually the best of them. First things first, for the hook tower, you should go with the hit points first. Really important thing though is not max it all the way. You only want to upgrade this category, this module, up to a hit point increase where you can tank a giant arrow. After that, you should increase the overall attack speed to make sure that you can hit and that you can overall pull in more of those attacking troops. And you can mess up the attacker even more. That's pretty much the overall concept. As soon as you have that attack speed maxed out, you can then go for the stun duration, which is not a bad thing whatsoever, but something really important to highlight. It is more important to lure more opponents in than actually stunning them for a longer duration. As soon as you have done that, then you can increase the remaining hit points, and that is pretty much the upgrade order you should follow for the hook tower. The overall, benefit of this tower to me is mostly that it's creating chaos. And this is really the big benefit of this defending defense. Because there is a lot of things where you have to have a special plan for this defense for many attack strategies. And attackers have to think out of the box a little bit. For example, for warden charges, you can shut down the entire attack really quickly with just hooking the warden in. If your attacker is not paying attention for only 1 second, hero charges, even Royal Champion charge, can fall apart really quickly and things can go downhill really fast. So be aware of that. This is the base which I would recommend with the hook tower, and overall huge shout out goes to Dark on top for the overall layout. I adjusted this a little bit to make sure that the hook tower fits in, because the concept here is to make sure that we can hook troops which made it to the core away from the town hall, and on top of that, if for example air attackers are attacking this, a queen which is funneling the top to the right side because you're trying to avoid the clan castle is actually getting hooked into the base and is not getting any value pretty much. So at this stage, you don't just have to worry about the defending clan castle, but it's about hook towers, for example, to make sure that your queen is staying safe. There's overall a lot of things you have to consider when attacking this with the hook tower, and you always need to have a plan B and always need to be on the edge of your feet to really have the plan to take that defense out. Skeleton spells are a really good choice, and I think we're going to see an increase of use to make sure that they can counter this seasonal defense. Next one is going to be the Flame Spinner. For this one, the same process. I would just upgrade the hit points so that a giant arrow cannot one-shot it anymore. Which means in our example, again, to level 4. As soon as we have done that, we can then upgrade the most important, which is, no big surprise, it's just the damage per hit. This is going to increase the overall DPS the fastest for this defense, and especially since the hit registration is a little bit more random, it's just more important that when you eventually hit a target, it should deal a lot of damage. Which means the second module that you should then max out is going to be the burst, which means the amount of shots to make sure that hopefully even more shots are going to land on the target. As soon as you have done that, you can then increase the hit points. But again, those remaining hit points are just like a nice to have thing. They're not really mandatory or crucial for the defense to work whatsoever. For this one, I would call this like the all-rounder. Because not just you're pretty good versus mass attacks, but you can even, not crazy good, but like in some way, defend things like the Royal Champion charge. Because this defense is start firing as soon as the attack starts. Which means it is going to attack anything which is getting close to it. Even a Royal Champion which is invisible. The damage is not really a lot, but for Royal Champion charge you can take any damage, or you will try to take any damage you can get versus that attacking hero. The base for this for this defense is looking like this. Again, huge shout out to Dark on top. I will have everything linked from it down below in the description, the same as the base links itself. For this one, I will put the defense on the top left into the gap because, well, no big surprise, but you want to make sure that people are not royal champion charging on that side. On the bottom side, though, we have then all of the traps. And even if people are then thinking, okay, I would charge actually in there, then you have all of the traps on the back end. So it's like a lose-lose situation for the attacker anyways. Then having the invisibility and the rage core, make sure that not as experienced players are going to struggle a lot versus this overall setup. Really giving the attacker a rough time, but with that we have already 2 of those seasonal defenses done. Let's take a look at the third one, which is going to be the Crusher Mortar. And then we're going to jump into what actually is the best seasonal defense. For this one, it is pretty much the same concept. But since this is mostly versus ground, or only versus ground, you can skip the hit point step if you want to, because not many people are using a giant arrow with ground attacks. So you could skip it if you want to. But I would still recommend going for like level 4 to make sure that you have those hit points. Right after, I would just increase the range, the radius a little bit, only to level 5, and then max out the DPS, and then return to the overall size of the impact of those projectiles. That's pretty much the order I would go for. And then again, the last thing is to max out the hit points of the defense. But again, to summarize this defense overall, it is just going to be a nightmare for ground attacks. And especially if you're in high legends, you can defend ground attacks with this quite solid. Because the biggest impact here is that you're able to attack troops which are hiding behind the tanks. For example, over here we can see the Warden being behind the Root Riders, like always, but you're actually going to take the Warden down while he's hiding behind the troops, which is a really big key, especially since people are more likely going to switch to a lot of rage auras and such things. So if you can take down the Warden, that is a really big step as a defender, because attackers would lose the rage aura. That's obviously a quite big deal. The base for this is looking something like this. We want to make sure that wherever the attacker is most likely approaching from, we have the angle to really skip into the Warden and overall into the DPS heroes or the DPS troops behind the tanks. The Warden, the Royal Champion charge, which is baited or like overall baited, it's like from the bottom left side, because you would get that compartment, but then you would most likely enter from the bottom compartment, which is into the monolith, but there's all of the traps. If you do the Royal Champion charge over there, there's still a lot of the traps. So it's not really good opening around the Clan Castle anyways. Then we have the red mines, and we have on the back end then the new seasonal defense, which can deal a ton of damage if you're not really careful with this. Again, all 3 bases were originally built by Dark on top. I just adjusted them a little bit to make sure that the seasonal defenses are in there, and I have all of the links down below. Another question, which of those 3 seasonal defenses is actually the best? And the unfortunate answer here is they are really well balanced, and it depends what type of player are you. To answer this, if you are a really casual player and your opponents most likely are quite casual as well, the hook tower is going to have the most impact. It is kind of coin flip, because if it's getting taken care of really quickly, it's not doing much, but at the same time, you can have a lot of impact and really smash the defense. On the other side, you have the Flame Spinner, and that thing pretty much always gets the value. It is a pretty consistent thing, solid versus air, solid versus ground, it always gets the value, but it's nothing outstanding. Even though the DPS is high, it is really luck dependent on if those fire bolts are actually hitting or if they're missing, and most of the time they're missing. So it's consistent in being average. I think that's the fairest way of putting it. On the other side, if you're in high legends, the Crusher Mortar is the way to go, obviously. Because in high legends, 90% of the attacks are actually Root Riders. This is not for the entire game because, well, most people like air, and for example, if you're in mid legends, I would for sure not recommend you to go with the Crusher Mortar, because the higher you get in legends, the more people are going to use the Root Riders. So this means if you want to play high up in legends, go for the Crush Mortar. If you're in mid legends and want to take the least risk possible and just want to have a solid average defense, go for the Flame Spitter, or like for the Flame defense. But if you want to have the biggest coin flip, which means the potential to completely confuse the opponent, and I think especially in the beginning of the usage, and you don't really need to upgrade this defense a lot, is the Hook Tower. You can use this already on level 3, like on level 1, like when you have nothing upgraded yet, because most of those seasonal defenses are already really solid to use from the early level on. You don't need to upgrade them a lot. The hit points a little bit, but otherwise the effects, the offensive modules, already on like 60 to 70% of their strength. So, to quickly summarize things, Poke Tower, if you want to have a potential incredible defense, but at the same time people will get better at it and counter with things like skeleton spells and such, but it's really good versus as well worse players. You can kind of compare it to the Invis Tower as a defense. Then we have the Flame defense, which is just an all-rounder, quite solid, but nothing outstanding. Or the Mortar, which is just really good versus ground, which is especially important when you're in high legends. But as I mentioned earlier in the video, I want to quickly touch on the hot topic of the temporary upgrades for the seasonal defense, but as well the supercharges. Because I've seen a lot of negative feedback now for the second sneak peek, where people were upset that after the 3 months, their progression is going to be taken away again. And I can totally understand that. The first time I heard about the concept of the temporary upgrades in Clash of Clans, I was not happy whatsoever. Because if I'm putting time, resources, or even worst case, money into it, I would like to keep it, to be honest. And this opinion has not changed since then. It doesn't matter if it's supercharges or if it's now the seasonal defenses. I am not a fan of this overall concept. I know that on the other side there's always this big argument of the catch-up mechanic, which is created because of the seasonal content. It means that other lower town players can now catch up. But this big argument is not justifying keep adding temporary upgrades. And I think with this new feature of the seasonal defenses, Supercell has reached the line, or maybe already crossed it, where this argument of the catch-up mechanic is not justifying any other more temporary upgrades anymore. At least that's my point of view. Let me know how you feel about it, but let's hope for the best. And as well, I hope I was able to provide for you first some nice bases and hopefully a really useful upgrade guide to get the most out of those seasonal defenses. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I will see you guys back tomorrow with the next Clash video. Until then, see ya and bye bye.